if you look at the mobile industry, right now, you guys know this industry far better than I do, okay? But what happened in the mobile industry? In the beginning with the mobile industry, everybody had to have their own spectrum. Everybody had to have their own towers. Everybody had to have their own networks. And at a point in time when, in the beginning, coverage was an issue, those things gave you differentiation. Later, when coverage became ubiquitous and we started to move into the Gs, 3G, 4G, 5G, capacity gave you differentiation. We're now at the point in the mobile industry where, for the vast majority, the 99% of consumers that are out there that use the mobile networks today, in most scenarios, they have enough capacity where they want it to do the things that they need to do.
Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. We're back in the studio because Piers stopped mucking about wherever he was going. Where was it? Were you in Boulogne?
Yeah, in my hometown, yeah.
How was it?
Good. The weather was very...
A bit moody.
Yeah, moody.
You feel a bit ripped off in northern France because it's got English weather.
Yeah, and it's windier actually, so yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well there
Did we talk about Ozzy Osbourne, by the way, on the last one?
I don't think we paid tribute to the legend of metal.
No, he had already died. I don't know.
Yeah, well, R.I.P. Ozzy Osbourne. I mean, very poetic that he did that one great big gig in Birmingham where apparently he couldn't even stand up, bless him.
Apparently he'd raised $150 million for the charity.
Wow. Oh, right. That was a charity gig, was it?
Yeah.
They must have trousered a bit of cash, surely.
Well, yeah.
So did he bite the head off a bat or not?
What, in his history? Yeah. I think it was a prop. I don't think he ever bit the head off an actual...
Well,
I read an interview saying he did, but he didn't know it was. He thought it was a prop.
So the BBC did a story on it recently saying that someone had come along with a bat, which I think was dead by then, but they threw it on the stage, and he picked it up thinking it was fake, bit it, and then felt some kind of warm fluid.
I heard that too.
Okay, maybe that's it. Yeah. I should say people might have heard an Irish brogue on their audio, and we mustn't sort of start chatting before we've introduced our guest. As a returning guest, Ronan Kelly, now from All Points Fibre.
Indeed.
Great to see you again, Ronan.
Likewise.
And I guess we're going to talk all things fibre. I'm with you. So
the way you did that.
Yeah, I know.
Tell you're a podcast host.
Tell I'm a pro. But back to biting the heads off bats. No.
I think we've done that. Did you get rabies if you did it?
Well, I think that was the worry.
You certainly get rabies shots after doing that, that's for sure.
No, the rabies was killed by the drugs in his system. Yeah.
I don't think doctors would advise it. But yeah, bless him. He's an absolute legend. Just what sort of crazy metal is all about. People like him and Lemmy.
Do you have a T-shirt, by the way?
I don't have a Black Sabbath T-shirt, no.
I've got an Aussie one, though. Meet the Osbournes.
Do you know what? I love a bit of Black Sabbath. I was never totally into Ozzy, his solo stuff. I didn't dislike it, but it wasn't a big thing for me.
Yeah.
And I thought the Osbournes was less. Do you remember...
I can't really remember any Black Sabbath songs apart from Paranoid.
War Pigs.
War Pigs is a very well-known one. Iron Man, Black Sabbath itself. What they were, as much as... And they did some great stuff after Ozzy left with Ronnie James Dio as singer, who's also dead. He died years ago. Like Heaven and Hell and that sort of thing. What was I going to say? Oh, the Osbournes.
Yeah.
Does anyone remember how the Osbournes started? No. It was a fly on the wall... No, I think it was Channel 4.
Oh.
But it was years ago, at least 20 plus years ago, which stands to reason because the Osbournes were around for a while. And they just did a fly on the wall thing with Ozzy Osbourne. He was going through a period of trying to be healthy. And so they'd be interviewing him, he'd be on an exercise bike. Well, the thing is, he was like, like in Asterix and Obelix doesn't need magic potion because he fell in a vat of it and he's permanently affected. That was what it was like with Ozzy Osbourne. Like, he was off it, but he still sounded off his tits the whole time.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, slurring that rummy way, and all that sort of thing. And anyway, and it was an instant hit. Everyone loved it because he was just such a legend, the way he was talking.
Yeah.
And then people sort of got into the domestic dynamics of the Osbournes.
Do we know what he sounded like before all the drugs?
It's just a brume.
Yeah, but so pretty much the same, but sped up a bit.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
less shakiness in his voice.
Yeah, just more coherent. So yes, bless him. I'm not going to spend too much time on opening bollocks because we got this hard stop. I'm going to say thank you very much to Nigel and Paul and Elena and Jen for hanging out with us after the pod last week, and that was good fun. Ended up having a good old sesh there. Went for a curry. And so it's great chatting to them. Nigel and Paula from Nokia, Jen and Elena from Liberty Comms, Elena being the person who always does our Christmas quiz.
Yep.
And so it's great to see all of them. And Elena put up a nice thing on LinkedIn going, it's a reminder in this age of AI that sometimes you just got to get together with people.
I saw that
have a drink
earlier.
and talk some shite.
Yeah, I know Nigel well. I like Nigel. He's good fun.
Yeah, he's a good lad. I kind of fucked up and guessed that he was Welsh when he's actually Irish.
Yeah.
But his accent's from all over the place. I think he's lived all over the place. But got that one wrong. Where he hasn't got like a pure, clean Irish accent like you, Ronan.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
I'm not going to confuse your accent for Welsh.
It's surprising. Most people, a few beers in aside, most people don't actually recognise my Irish accent after.
It's not the strongest.
No,
it's definitely not the strongest.
Atlantic.
Do you get after a few beers? Well, open that one up. Oh, actually, we should give you a shout out. So Ronan did well with the beers. So. You're based near Reading.
We are indeed. Our points is in Reading, and we went to the local microbrewery called 0 Degrees. Thank you very much for making the extra effort. So you're going to have a go at this Time Warp Session IPA. Absolutely. I have to give kudos to Mark Dietra, who's our
he's been in touch
head
with
of
me
press, etc.
Yeah.
So Mark ran out and grabbed it for me, to be fair.
Nice one, Mark.
Thank you.
Cheers. Actually, I was going to. I was going to say, Ronan need to bring anything. And you can bring some beers if you want. So he obviously took that hint to heart. We've got the Bohemian Czech Pilsner, brewed in Reading. I don't know where it's brewed, actually. I just made that up.
No, it is brewed in Reading, I think, somewhere near there.
Yep.
Our award-winning version of the classic golden lager. But so it's inspired by Pilsner.
It's like Madry.
Absolutely.
You know, the Spanish beer.
Yeah, Madry. Don't get me started on Madry.
Yeah, that's a real con, that
Have you ever encountered Madry, Ronan?
Yes.
And the fucking thing wouldn't know Spain if it bit it on the arse. They've just completely fabricated this Spanish brand.
That's marketing for you.
Yeah, well,
I hadn't even heard of it 2 years ago.
And then he's also he brought 3 bags. He's also brought some mango beer.
You got to try that one now before we leave.
I've got one of them on ice. One of us will take the plunge on that.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Ronan. Thanks a lot, Mark.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Right. That's it as far as opening bollocks, isn't it, Ian? You got nothing? You haven't been up to anything?
Just I don't think so.
Live your normal monastic existence.
Yeah.
So
he's about to be up to something.
He's about to be up to something. You're going to go off to Slovakia, isn't it?
Yeah. Just for a change.
Just for a change.
Never been there.
I know, it's like me and the Canaries. Fucking Canaries. So sick of it. But yeah, can't be helped. And Pierre's going to go off to Venezuela later on in the month.
Just for a change.
Yeah.
Just for a change. Just go there. Yeah, Pierre's other half from Venezuela.
He's right.
He hasn't just got a fetish for Venezuela. His other half's from there.
Do you know, you say that, but over there, there's a guy, a really, now because of social media, quite famous, from Manchester, who's like, he goes there all the time, and I think he even bought a place. He just
digs it.
Yeah. And he speaks like with the exact accent that they have.
It's so he's really blended in.
Yeah, he absorbed everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is it safer now than it was a few years ago?
Yeah, it's safer.
It's better. Okay.
It seems to have settled down. It doesn't come up in the news very much.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Well, fingers crossed for you, mate. Okay. So Ronan, when you were on the pod, it was a couple of years ago, yeah?
Indeed.
You were at a company that I'd always known you to be part of, was Adtran.
Mm-hmm.
You must have been there for ages.
14 years.
Wow.
That's good innings.
Went by quickly. It was the old adage, time flies when you're having fun. I joined with the intent of staying for a couple of years, and one day I woke up and went, 14 years, where the hell did that come?
So I remember when I first met Ronan, probably wasn't too long after I started in this job, and there's this event that's run by a firm called Broadband World Forum. And I always used to get briefings set up with Ronan, and after the first one, I was always a bit like, oh, fuck, I'm really going to be exposed for how little I know about this stuff. And I've got to be honest, it's great to have guests like you on, because I'll be honest, over the years, I mean, I've never had any top-down editorial guidance. I just looked at the URL and thought I better write about telecoms, and that's about as profound as my editorial strategy has been in that time. But I have naturally veered more towards mobile, partly because certainly historically, not so much now, historically, it seemed to be the more fast-moving, fun, dynamic, interesting, newer space. And everyone's got a mobile phone, and you know you can get it's a bit more tangible to the dilettante. And I just always remember thinking this bloke has forgotten more about the fixed line side of things than I'll ever know. And anyway, but you're not at Adtran anymore. Why don't you? I'll stop banging on. Why don't you tell us what you're up to now?
Sure, yeah. So I'm over at All Points Fibre Networks now, which is based out of Reading, and All Points Fibre Networks is a wholesale fibre provider. So it's a company that was created about 4 years ago through the combination of a collection of altnets. You guys are familiar with the altnets, the alternative providers building out fibre infrastructure in the UK.
You do both use altnets, don't you?
I use Community Fibre.
There you go, exactly. Very good altnet, one of the Adtran customers.
I believe Pierre's on Community Fibre as well. Yeah. They're pretty good. They're in London in our area, aren't they?
So
basically, so they had an investor called Fern Trading. Fern Trading is controlled by Octopus Investments, aka Octopus Energy, and they had invested in a number of companies. One was Giganet, one was Jurassic Fibre, and one was Swish Fibre. Within those, Giganet had acquired what we refer to as a virtual ISP, so basically somebody reselling their services, internet services, over somebody else's infrastructure. So they didn't actually have any infrastructure themselves.
Yep.
So there was a company called Cuckoo.
Yep.
So Giganet had acquired Cuckoo. And then there was a side project in a company called All Points Fibre Limited. And it was almost an experimental network infrastructure that was built to service about 1,500 households thereabouts, and they were testing out various technologies across that network. So the decision was taken that they were going to combine all the businesses together, make it into one business, but they were also going to shift the focus of the business. So those original companies, Giganet, Jurassic and Swish, were what we describe as vertically integrated fibre providers. So not only were they building the fibre out to people's homes, they were also providing the internet service as part of that exclusively across that fibre infrastructure. So what they decided to do was combine all the companies together and restructure the company as a wholesale-only provider. So that way, we were no longer selling direct to consumer, and instead we were selling to ISPs.
And what's the strategic thinking behind that?
It's really to do with penetration. So if you look at the UK market today, latest results out this morning, 79% of households in the UK market today can access a full fibre connection if they want.
Yeah.
But if you look at the rate of adoption across the UK, it's significantly lower than that. And that's
about 16%, I think, according to Inca last year.
I can't remember the very latest figures on it, but it's low.
16%?
Well, it was 16% across altnets, so it's higher on OpenReach. I think OpenReach is claiming about 36%, but obviously they're moving existing customers onto fibre, so it's a bit easier for them.
They are, but there's other aspects to it as well. There's time is a key part with all of this. Like you might recall when we met the last time, I was just coming off the end of my tenure with Fibre to the Home Council Europe, that I had chaired for a couple of years. And we see it across all the fibre networks within Europe, that time is a major element within this thing. That, you build out your fibre network within the first year. If you're lucky, particularly if you're going into an area where there's pent-up demand for bandwidth, you'll typically see take-up rates get up to in the order of about, somewhere between 7 and 10%. Year 2 gets up to about 15%. Year 3 up to about, maybe 20% if you're doing well.
Right.
By the time you get out to about 5 or 6 years, then you're starting to nudge up towards this kind of 30, 35%. Now, that's when you start to get into the realms of brand equity. And this is where I think an awful lot of the altnet providers become challenged, because you have a combination of brand equity coupled with bundle complexity from the point of view of their brand will carry them so far. But when they're trying to compete against a Sky or a TalkTalk or someone like that, it's very difficult.
Yep.
And then you have the bundle complexity. When Sky comes along and says, I'll do your broadband, I'll do your phone, I'll do your TV, and the altnet can only do the broadband, it's compelling to have a bundled offering quite often for a lot of people.
Can I just ask, because the altnets it gets used as a sort of loose term to describe all of them, but they're obviously all very different. I mean, you were saying you're wholesale only. The one that's maybe, I don't think they like being called an altnet, but the one that's probably the best known is maybe City Fibre, and they don't have a retail role at all either, do they? But
no, correct. Yeah. And this is where All Points differs again. So when we combined those companies together, it gave us access with the fibre infrastructure that was built by all of them. It gave us access to 500,000 households. When you're trying to be a wholesale provider targeting big retail names and you've got 500,000 households, it's interesting. But it stops there. It's not enough to get them to go through the integration cost of integrating onto your platform. So we knew that from the get-go. So the plan was always combine the companies together. You'll have 500,000 of on-net footprint. immediately start working on partnering with the likes of BT Wholesale, which we did. They were the first partner that we brought on board. We also partnered with City Fibre.
It's not obvious to me when you're a wholesaler why you partner with BT Wholesale.
I'll explain it. Give me a second and I'll get to it. So we partnered with BT Wholesale, we partnered with City Fibre, and we're also in the process now of extending out our network infrastructure into the OpenReach exchanges around the country. So we're also partnering with OpenReach as part of that. Why is that important? If I'm a consumer-focused ISP or a business-focused ISP, and I'm looking to get access to the broadest possible amount of fibre footprint with the least amount of pain, that's where All Points Fibre comes in. They do one integration into All Points Fibre. All Points Fibre, we're an API native company, so everything in the business runs API native. All of our APIs are based on the TM Forum standard APIs as well, so there's no homegrown stuff built in there. So they can integrate into us once, and in doing that, that immediately gives them access to BT Wholesale's entire footprint, City Fibre's entire footprint, the APFN on-net footprint, and we're turning on now slowly but surely the OpenReach footprint as well, which will give, when we go with OpenReach, what will happen there is we'll put our equipment into the OpenReach exchanges. When we order a service and OpenReach deliver that service for us, they hand off that service to us in the same exchange, and now it's on our network. So what we've done, we touched briefly on Aquila before we started the pod.
Yeah.
Let me explain what Aquila is. So we've spent the last 2 years now basically building a brand new state-of-the-art platform. Now, what I refer to as a platform, I mean a combination of both network but also systems infrastructure. It's been built brand new from the ground up completely. All the systems, all of the network infrastructure. There's a national backbone that's been built out. So the national backbone today currently runs at 400 gigabits per second of capacity. It's all built on the latest Juniper PTX equipment. So everything in the systems and in the network infrastructure. The oldest stuff that we have in the business today now is the OLTs, so the Adtran and the Nokia OLTs that we've deployed, and they're about 4 years, maybe 5 years old now at this point, but they're all using the latest XGS-PON technology that we talked about on the last pod.
Yeah, they get you to fix the Adtran stuff.
They don't let me near it, and rightly so. But then as you move in towards the edge networks and then into the core networks, all that stuff is like 18 months old, something like that.
Right.
All the systems are less than a year old. So it's a brand new, very, very capable infrastructure that gives you access to the largest fibre footprints available within the UK.
Just to be clear, a customer of yours can get the service outside your network footprint area. Is that quite unusual? Because you always think, because one of the criticisms that's made, I guess, is, well, you're only serving Brighton. And community fibre is in Wandsworth, but you go outside of that.
And that is always the challenge for a lot of the providers. It's not unique, but it is quite unusual. Where it does become unique is when you start to combine the mix between the on-net footprint and all the different off-net footprints. And we'll continue to extend it. So today, as we talked about, with BT Wholesale, City Fibre and OpenReach, we are in various different stages of onboarding with some of the other larger altnets as well. Now, there's one thing that we stand accountable for with the customers, which is the quality of the service that we deliver. So there is a bar that we need the network providers to reach before we'll onboard them.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we're learning quite quickly now with the interactions with some of the altnets, to the point that you raised, there's been many different approaches applied across how they rolled out the networks, the processes that they use, the SLAs that they're willing to offer over the services, and so on and so forth. So there's an alignment piece, let's just say, to be done with quite a few of them before we'll say, yeah, you're good to go to plug into Aquila, and we'll market the UPRNs that you've got available to you to the ISP customers that are connecting in through Aquila.
So they're because you mentioned Community Fibre as being a customer, but I don't know if you can talk about this, but the relationship you have with them, because I always think that they actually build the fibre, and they came around and sort of messed around, drilling holes through the building and putting strands in. But are they? Yeah, how do they?
So just to clarify, that conversation around Community Fibre was with my old hat on in Adtran. They were an Adtran customer,
right? Okay.
Just to clarify, but the likes of Community Fibre would be the calibre of altnet that we would be targeting. Typically, when people were saying who would you go after and who would you not go after, what we said internally in the early days was anyone that's north of 1 million homes passed, we'll be having serious conversations with. When you start going down the long tail, it just the overhead that goes with it gets messier. And to be quite honest, with the amount of build that OpenReach have done at this point in time, for some of those more niche locations, the need to go out there when OpenReach is largely overbuilt in some scenarios, we don't need to go there.
Yeah. So a relationship with someone like BT Wholesale that you would have to cover certain parts of the country, it's like there's quite a chain of companies involved, isn't there? Because there's the underlying infrastructure, which is sort of OpenReach built.
Correct,
then there's BT Wholesale, and then there's you, and then there's the kind of retailer.
Correct.
But it sounds like you get to the concerns about sort of the margins in the business, and whether that's...
The margins are razor thin in this business, and that's why I mentioned earlier we're API native. Everything is built around automation. Everything is built for scale from the get-go. Thankfully, because of all the equipment that we've deployed, being the very latest equipment out there, it's all built on the latest 16 nanometer chipsets, etc. Energy consumption and everything like that has been factored into our operational cost as part of it. So the way we look at it, the way we look at the market, I may or may not have touched on this the last time we said. I don't think I did, actually. If you look at where the market on a European basis, but also here in the UK was, let's say 5 years ago, something like that, their bandwidth was scarce. If somebody came knocking on your door and said, I can give you a fibre, when you were limping along on an ADSL out of the exchange, or, people would take the hand off you, quite literally. What we've seen now, per the latest results out today, 79% of households can access a full fibre, 88% of households have access to gigabit.
Yeah.
And in many scenarios, they can get that for less than what it costs to go out for a curry. You know what I mean? So there's exceptional value out there in the marketplace. Trying to push that price point back up is going to be nigh on impossible, because people will always just churn to the next cheapest that's available.
That's true of telecoms on the mobile side.
Absolutely. It's easy to drive it down, but you can't get it back up again. So the real focus that APFN has brought to the table is how do we streamline the operations for our ISP customers so that their cost to serve is the absolute minimum it needs to be.
Makes sense.
And what we're trying to do is really focus in on operational efficiencies, not just for ourselves. We run a very slick end-to-end order journey, but also to pass some of those benefits back through to the service providers. So, for example, if you think about the teams that the service providers need to have in place to be able to support a broadband service, even when it's provided by someone like us, they need tech support people, they need customer care people, etc. So what we're trying to do, we have an offering that gets bundled as part of the product today called Aquila Pulse, and Pulse being the pulse of the service and the infrastructure that provides that service so they can have their finger on the pulse. What that does is it gives them unique insights into the availability at a service level and at a key function level that enables that service, so that they can very quickly themselves, with very low skilled individuals, ascertain, is there a problem on the network? Is there a problem with the systems that deliver the service? Is there a problem with the transaction engine that we place orders with APFN? And they can rule us in or out very, very quickly. And when they rule us out, they know, okay, this is our problem, we need to go troubleshoot it. So what we're trying to do is really streamline everything so that they become much more efficient. Their operational cost is lowered, but more importantly, they can give a result to the customer much more quickly, so the satisfaction levels go up much higher as well.
And is the plan, in terms of the actual network footprint, your own fibre, are you still building that out, or is that no longer sort of the priority?
It's not the priority. There's very modest levels of kind of infill around it where we've got footprint and, people are, it's right outside the door type thing, but it's not the focus. Without question, the focus is on the Aquila platform.
Right.
So it feels like the whole altnet business model seems to have pivoted a fair bit in the last, 5 years, or maybe even less than that. I mean, we had, who's now a former colleague of yours, but you were talking about OpenNet. Mm-hmm. We had Jarlath Finnegan on. He was wearing his OpenNet hat at the time.
Giganet, yeah.
Giganet. Oh, what was
OpenNet's different. Yeah. OpenNet's like a BSS OSS company that's been bought by Amdocs.
Maybe I thought of them because they're Irish.
We tripped you up.
Giganet. Yeah, Giganet. Sorry, Jarlath, if you're listening. But he was wearing his Giganet hat at the time. And that's part of all this. And I remember chatting to him on the pod, and then other people we've had on the pod, and other people I've written about, like I think Hyperoptics one, where the altnet model seemed to be very much, we're going to build our own infrastructure and and flog that. You know, am I right to detect a change in direction of travel, perhaps a maturing of the market where everyone's a bit like, hold on a sec, perhaps we're going to, as you seem to be doing, focusing less on your own infrastructure and more on utilising what's already there?
I don't think it's across the board. There's a couple of things. One, I would caveat that APFN doesn't view itself as an altnet. We're a platform provider that happens to have some network infrastructure that we built historically, is probably the best way to view it.
So the end bit is quite important, both in terms of comms networks and a network of offerings.
We have a national network that allows us to plug into all the key service providers, all the key content providers, etc., and glue everything together.
Yeah.
It's not just about the access network.
I would say the other thing that works to your advantage, not that I should be doing this as a journalist because I'm supposed to put you on the spot, but the Octopus brand's quite strong in the UK anyway, in another sector.
It is,
I guess, and
I landed up there.
To,
do you remember especially during the lockdown and all that sort of thing, just loads of energy companies kept going bust, and I just kept getting bounced from one to another.
Yeah, well, that's how I ended up with them. I was with a company called Bulb, and they got bought by Octopus, and then all of a sudden Octopus is being talked about as a potential MVNO, and it owns.
There's lots of conversations around Octopus. I think the key thing that APFN is trying to do is we want to lower the barriers to entry. If you think about, there's lots of large companies out there with huge consumer bases, with really strong brand equity, that if they were to enter into the broadband market, they would likely do quite well. The challenge they have is it's viewed as a complex market with a lot of skills and capabilities that are not native to their businesses today that would be needed. So what we're trying to do within APFN is saying, you don't need any of that.
Yeah.
You can work through us, and basically we have all the skills and capabilities in-house. We can provide you an ISP in a box, and basically you apply your brand onto it. We do all the plumbing underneath. We work with our network delivery partners who roll out their networks to provide the connectivity as part of it. And if you want to do the customer support piece yourself, we can feed you into Aquila Pulse, and we'll provide you with the greatly simplified views that your customer care agents can self-serve up to the point that they've diagnosed it's either a fault on APFN and they hand it back to us and we run with it, or they've resolved the issue.
So there's obviously been like the consolidation that brought the company into existence, but it sounds like you wouldn't be wanting to play a part in buying up small networks that are adjacent to all points at the moment necessarily, in the way that City Fibre seems to have suddenly gone off on one now that it's raised some funding.
It's got some more Goldman Sachs wedge.
They're talking about being this sort of kingmaker is the word that gets used, isn't it?
Steady on.
Yeah. If you look at the mobile industry, right, now you guys know this industry far better than I do, okay? But what happened in the mobile industry? In the beginning with the mobile industry, everybody had to have their own spectrum. Everybody had to have their own towers. Everybody had to have their own networks. And at a point in time when in the beginning coverage was an issue, those things gave you differentiation. Later, when coverage became ubiquitous and we started to move into the Gs, 3G, 4G, 5G, capacity gave you differentiation. We're now at the point in the mobile industry where for the vast majority, the 99% of consumers that are out there that use the mobile networks today, in most scenarios, they have enough capacity where they want it to do the things that they need to do. Mm-hmm. You get these sidebar conversations about mobile's going to eat fix and all that rubbish, right?
Those have been going on since I got into Telecom in 1999. I think.
Let's not go down that rabbit hole.
You must have been spotting every time Broadband World Forum used to happen. I'd meet you there. There'd normally be one or two stands trumpeting the FWA fixed wireless access thing at the time.
I'm big fan
has its place.
It has its place. But,
but bandwidth-wise, it's not going to get anywhere near fibre, obviously, and no one thinks that.
Exactly.
And sometimes you get people who try and insinuate it. Yeah. And like, it's as good as fibre. Oh, shut up. Of course it's not.
Exactly.
And especially not in capacity. Even if in some places you could get great speed to one house. One house.
Yeah.
Tell that to the Ukrainian drone operators.
Where you can't get...
We're using fibre.
Where it's the only way of getting it.
That's right, aren't they? Because the radio signals are getting blocked.
Yeah,
so.
That's right. So they've got fibre.
They've got these. So even there.
Yeah.
There's the use case. The Russians might.
but before we go too far off topic, if you look at how the mobile market played out, many of those players that built the infrastructure, bought the spectrum, etc., have now moved on to being MVNOs.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So are we overbuilt?
Differentiate them.
In the UK, are we overbuilt on fibre?
A little bit, yeah. And it will continue. As Openreach continues to roll out their network, they've their target at 25 million, I think it is.
Yeah.
And they're doing exceptionally well.
They're at 19 at the moment. Yeah. That was the latest update I got this week.
Yeah,
so.
No, they're doing really, really well. And with my old Fibre to the Home Council hat on, I used to track all the European markets. I haven't done it in a few years now, but the max run rate that we saw across any of the European markets was about 1 million homes passed a quarter. Yeah. Openreach has beaten that. They're up at 1.1, 1.2 million a quarter.
But them doing it, and I don't blame them for doing it, because they want to defend their existing broadband business, obviously, and they said they were going to do this years ago. And obviously there's a sense that they were spurred to do that partly by the altnet momentum that was kind of starting then. But it doesn't sound like it's necessarily good news for a lot of the altnets.
At the end of the day, when there is choice, consumers will lean towards value and quality.
Yeah.
Like they do in every other sector.
And brand, as you said earlier.
Brand has a role to play as well. Yeah, exactly. But I think if you've already got a customer and you're delivering a high quality service at a fair price, then you've got switching risk that's involved. So even when the brand comes knocking, that can cause inertia in its own right. Because if you've got something that works, you're kind of going,
yeah.
Yeah. It's just the human aspect of it.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, exactly.
But there must be, I don't know how many altnets there are in the UK at the moment. I think you came out with a figure last time you were on when you were at Adtran, and it's high, isn't it? It's over 100.
There was at that time there was over 100 that were registered with Ofcom as. Can you call them altnets? They were registered with Ofcom that they were building fibre.
And there's obviously the well-known ones like All Points and City Fibre and
Community Fibre.
Community Fibre. Netonomy is the other one I was thinking of, because I
there's that one that
can't remember the CEO's name.
Hull.
I did interview him recently.
Jeremy.
Yeah.
For some reason, Hull's got its own unique telecoms scene.
Well, that's older though, isn't it? That goes back years.
Yeah, I know.
They're like 150 years old or something.
Yeah.
Someone told me that stat there recently. And I was astounded.
It's weird.
Wow, I didn't realise that.
Yeah. But it sounds like there is going to be. There aren't going to be 100 plus companies, are there, in 5 years' time?
The consolidation has already begun. We've seen with City Fibre, for example, they've been snapping up a few bits and pieces here and there. They've recently secured new funding as well. A couple of billion have come in there off the back of that. So we'll see more of that.
Including an accordion facility, apparently, which I've never heard of before. But
they want to do an impression of a sort of Parisian busker.
There you go, exactly. but I think what's going to be a challenge for the industry is, to the point that you raised, Ian, everybody's gone about it a different way.
Yeah.
And so many of them have created their own in-house homegrown spaghetti that, the coders who wrote this really clever stuff have left and gone to another company and blah, blah, blah.
Been replaced by AI.
Well, I don't think they're there yet, but give it time. But a lot of these companies, I suspect there's parts of their business that have things running under the hood that they don't actually know how it works. And when it comes to trying consolidating things, it's going to be very difficult to unpick.
Your message came through loud and clear about the newness of a lot of the kit and the infrastructure.
Well, put it in perspective, right? So when we brought together our 5 companies collectively down to 2, and then we spun out Cuckoo, what was left within APFN was over 350 unique vendor solutions between hardware and software applications that were running
that's a lot.
Those companies. Now, we've taken it down. Aquila runs on 9.
Right.
To put it in perspective.
Pretty good going.
And that's 9 that are provided by best-of-breed vendors. 9 that are all current software stacks, and nothing's legacy, nothing's out of date. And where this stuff starts to get really, really important now is as we start to look at things like the Security Act and stuff like that. How do you stand over the security of stuff that was written by some clever engineer who left a few years ago that you don't really know where it is in your business and how it works? So there's a lot of challenges that I think are going to come out into the industry in the coming years that haven't yet surfaced, particularly now. You touched on AI, particularly now as AI is being used as the vehicle to drive all the hacking, etc. Now, trying to secure your infrastructure is getting harder and harder all the time. Yeah. I only had a conversation with our executive team yesterday on our protocols for deep fakes, so that when I call up on the end of the phone or on the end of a video call and it looks and feels like me and I tell someone to do something that smells wrong, what's the protocol to test that it's really me?
I suppose you can't tell us what the protocol is, but it was quite an interesting topic.
Yep.
So
they've got to be something secret, something only you know about yourself. Like, what's your favourite colour or something? It's got to be a bit more.
It's already searching.
No, it's got to be something a bit more specific, isn't it? Like, what was the name of your first pet or something? I don't know.
But if you were to look out,
I should have been in on that meeting.
Christ.
Keep fishing.
If you were to look out into the future, sort of 2028, 2029, when Openreach will have obviously achieved its 25 million target, then it seems like it's pretty much on track. But do you think it will go down to being a fairly small number of fibre providers across the whole country, where a lot of these smaller networks have been absorbed by someone like City Fibre or Virgin Media O2? And is that where it's going?
It doesn't sound like, from how you've described the evolution of All Points Fibre network, until you told us just now that that's not a priority, I would have said that your organisation might be a likely focus for consolidation.
But I remember Jarlath saying this, I think, when we had him on the pod, that he could sort of envisage a kind of piecing together of networks over different parts of the country and I guess that's the challenge for City Fibre. I thought this when they were talking about their takeover plans, is that they want to remain a wholesaler. So if you do buy someone, I think they bought someone and had to sell the retail service business back to them because they only wanted a certain part of it. It's quite, and you've got to make sure that they don't directly overlap, because otherwise, why would you might buy it for customers, I guess. But
no, exactly. Like for City Fibre, they're a wholesale infrastructure provider, if you will.
Yeah.
So hence they had to spin back out the ISP arm of that, and that's not a bad deal. Like for the people that built that original business, I'm sure they've got some sort of consideration from City Fibre. Plus, they now have an ISP in an area where they've already invested quite a bit of time and effort in building some degree of brand equity.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily the worst deal. They can continue to build that business as they go forward, but they don't have to worry about the heavy cost associated with extending the networks, and that's where City Fibre comes into play as part of that. To go back to your question, without question, it's going to consolidate. Now, what's the magic number? That's what everybody wants to know. Like I remember when I was over at Adtran talking about this, and in my view, it was going to be somewhere between 5 and 10.
Right.
Probably closer to 5 though. And the thought process was Openreach was going nowhere.
Yeah.
Virgin Media was going nowhere. City Fibre was going nowhere.
Especially not now that Goldman Sachs
now there's the additional
gone around the back of the sofa and found some more cash.
There you go, exactly. So you've got the big three there as part of that. You're going to have some regional players that they're not going to get overbuilt just because of where they were. I've just come back off holidays there the week before last as well, and part of my holiday I did a motorcycle trip around the NC 500 in Scotland. Oh. And you start to really get...
Where's that? Is that the bit right in the
right
top?
Up the very top, exactly.
To cross to John O'Groats.
Yeah, exactly.
That's supposed to be nice up there.
That's a far more adventurous and manly holiday.
I wanted to go up there years ago, never got around to doing it.
Put it this way, in my daily vocabulary, I never used the word epic.
Right.
It was epic.
Yeah.
And I bet the driving's mad around there. Lots of windy roads.
Lots of very fast cars.
Yeah, they all go up there because there's not a lot of other
so there's other
cars.
people who've got the same bright idea, but in fast cars.
This is where you can drive your car fast.
Lots of rooming around.
And there's no speed camera.
Sounds fucking intimidating.
No, it was good fun. But the key thing is you really start to get a proper sense of rural.
Yeah.
And you start to get a proper sense of if somebody's gone to the bother of building a fibre there, they're not going to get overbuilt because the sheer cost, the distance they've got to do. So there's going to be some niche players that have carved out some geographic locations that are just difficult to replicate, that they'll probably carry
no one
on
else
as
can
a
be
lifestyle
bothered to get
business.
involved with.
Exactly.
But it's partly to do with, you've got that extreme where there's only some one company, say, has done it, but you get these other extremes. I think Point Topic goes on about this, where there might be sort of 5 or 6 in one area. And I think it was Bain saying, and Nokia said this as well, you probably need about a 30-odd% take-up rate for it to be kind of...
Yeah, I was going to ask about that ratio.
Which implies you want 3, really, in any given area. So you can obviously have more companies than that in the UK, but in a given area...
Just butting in, does that stat refer to, if you've passed a property... You need about a 30% of the properties you pass to take you up for it to be a viable business. Yeah. So in other words, you couldn't support...
Does that sound accurate to you?
Yeah. So to distill that down, a given property couldn't realistically support more than 3 fibre providers passing it for all of those fibre providers
a region
to have
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
3 per region, more or less.
Like we did here in the early days. And again, this was back when I was over at Adtran. In the early days, there were some areas where we heard of up to 6 overbuilding each other. But that I haven't heard that in a long time. I think that nonsense has stopped now.
Right.
It's the sheer cost of doing
it.
But
But even the areas where there might be 4 or 5, I'm guessing Openreach is still going to go there eventually anyway, because it's got its 25 million target. So even, and I know whenever sort of Greg Mesh gets on, Greg Mesh from... For people who don't know who he is, he's the City Fibre CEO, but whenever he gets on stage, he's always like, Openreach is overbuilding people and they shouldn't be doing. But I guess if they don't, they lose a lot of market share, don't they? And then it's not good for them.
And the reality is, OpenReach, just like every other incumbent in Europe, they have a customer base that they need to defend, and they're right to defend it.
Yeah.
Equally, they hit a certain tipping point where they're so heavily invested in fibre now at this point in time, but at this point in time, they're now running 2 networks because they haven't switched off the original copper network.
Yeah.
So they have to start switching off the copper network.
Yeah.
We had someone from OpenReach on not too long ago. I don't know if you heard that one. A lady called Juliet, who was basically there talking about the switch off and all that sort of thing.
So switch off is really, really important as part of it. And like herein lies the challenge. And, I've had various discussions, some with different politicians, some with folks from Ofcom and stuff like that, of how do we shake people out of their comfort zone to get them to move on to full fibre? Because all this investment is occurring. You don't want to create a scenario where...
When you say people, you mean consumers?
Consumers, exactly. Right. You don't want to create a scenario where you end up with an implosion in the infrastructure because nobody's taking up the services. And part of the challenge you've got is, if you look at different markets across Europe, look at Spain, look at Italy, where the take rates are quite high on fibre, much higher than what we have here in the UK. France is another good example. One of the key differences in those markets is, cable is less ubiquitous. So there's not as much cable out there. So, it's a much smaller subset of the population can enjoy the higher bandwidths that cable would do versus twisted pair. B, they never enabled VDSL.
Yeah.
So it was only ADSL from the central office, which meant typically the maximum speed that they could get was less than 20 megabits per second. In this new world where we all stream, 20 megabits per second just isn't enough now. If you have 2 TVs on the go at the same time, you start to run out of steam very, very quickly on that. So what they saw was, when they rolled out fibre, there was a pent-up demand on a nationwide basis. And when they sought to satisfy that demand, the take rate went really, really high as a result.
I'll tell you what, anecdotally, my recent holiday in northern Spain, the place we were staying in was in the middle of nowhere, back in the hills, back from the north coast. And our Wi-Fi was just fucking brilliant. And this place, I mean...
Yeah, Starlink.
If it didn't... I doubt it. If it didn't even have plumbing, I wouldn't have blamed them, because it's honestly one set of about 2 or 3 houses that have got to be half a mile from any other house.
Yep.
And yet, fair play to the Spanish, they seem to do infrastructure pretty well.
Yep.
Maybe they got Neil McRae in to build them a fibre line or something.
Yeah. I've got another question about the business model. Back to what you were talking about earlier, the APFN. Have I got that right?
APFN, yep.
Yeah. And this sort of apparent, you didn't use the term, I'm going to use it for you to correct me if I got it wrong, this apparent co-opetition with people like City Fibre and with BT Wholesale / OpenReach and all that sort of thing. It's a bit counterintuitive to me why they would want to enable you to do that. Why give you a piece of the action?
Because we bring customers to
Good money for them.
It's a lower customer cost of acquisition for them to take it off us than for them to have to put feet in the street out on the ground capturing those customers.
So what kind of, I mean, obviously you can't detail them like individually, but what kind of customers are you getting that they're not? I mean, do you have particular markets that you focus on?
So if you look at some of the names that we've announced, like obviously we obviously Cuckoo was our first customer that went live on Aquila, and that's in the family. So
it's cheating.
You could argue that's cheating. I'll take that. But also we've got companies like Gamma Telecom, companies like Daisy, companies like OneCom. So a lot of the business-focused customers are really seeing the opportunity here where they can go target using what we call BFTTP, Business Fibre to the Prem solutions, and go targeting after any of the legacy copper-based SHDSL type services, but also a lot of the more expensive Ethernet type services. They're able to go after those with a BFTTP type service offering. By them integrating into us, they have a choice. They could integrate directly into BT Wholesale and directly into City Fibre and directly into ABCD to try and get the coverage. Or they can just do one integration into us and we give them the full coverage. That's the
sounds
big
quite
benefit.
compelling. It sounds like you're the only people doing this sort of thing.
We're the only ones doing it on a modernised infrastructure with standardised APIs.
Okay.
I guess not having to worry about what you just mentioned, the sort of PSTN switch off and stuff, which is a big burden. Although I was looking at OpenReach's numbers, they've still got like 1.6 million customers, I think, on ADSL, and like a load who are not classed as broadband at all on wholesale line rental. And if you look at the rate that it's gone down in the last 2 years, it's gone down quite a lot, but it would need to go down a lot more quickly between now and January sort of 2027 for them to kind of get those all out of the mix.
Yeah.
And they kind of. So, I wrote a story this week actually, was a bit sort of critical of it because an insider basically said, well, they're going to say they've met the PSTN shutdown target, but what they've done is they've used this SOTAP product, which is like building in Nokia media gateways that just basically convert the analog signal to digital. So you're still keeping a lot of copper infrastructure in place. And then you look at the exchange closures, which is sort of related to the PSTN shutdown. I think they've got 5,600 exchanges.
Yep.
They want to get. They said they only need 1,000 in a fibre future.
Correct. Yeah.
So how many are they going to get rid of by 2030? 103. And it's like, I don't get why that particular part of it would be so slow.
Part of it comes down to you guys. You've seen me talk before on stage, and I'm sure you've heard me use the phrase: "The easiest thing in telecoms is to turn something on. The hardest thing is to turn something off."
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem. There's always some legacy thing that needs that original copper service, and until they come up with an alternative to whatever that thing is, they continue to be under pressure to deliver those services to go forward. Now, the one thing I will say is there are there's some precedents now across Europe. Look at Telefonica in Spain, for example, where they've made fantastic inroads into shutting down their copper exchanges, shutting down all the equipment in the exchanges, removing the copper. The same has happened in France as well. So the precedents are there. It can be done, and I think there's a lot of leverage there. I think for Openreach at the appropriate time to be able to work with Ofcom, etc., to say, look, come on, every other market is doing this out there. It makes sense for us to be able to get the efficiencies to go with this. Because the key thing here with it, and this is part of, where we need to think, we talked earlier, how do we incentivize people to get them off their copper connection that's delivering 40 meg today and get them onto a fibre connection with a minimum of 100 meg, particularly where, the prices are probably about the same point.
Yeah.
How do we break that inertia? Some are of the view that you can leverage things like taxation to help with that. Now, not a one-time tax. A one-time tax says, I'm going to put £5 onto it and blah, blah, blah. People will just absorb that. I think you need to lay out a roadmap of taxation to say, and you focus it on, if you look at the energy consumption, for example, of a copper-based service or a coax-based service versus the energy consumption of a PON-based service, right? Significantly higher. So you focus it on the green agenda, carbon emissions and so on and so forth, and you apply it as a green tax and say, here's going to be the roadmap of green taxes on copper-based broadband services. £5 this year, next year another £10, the year after that. And then people will see there's no future in this. It's a bit like smoking.
Yeah.
Nobody, in the early years when they put a couple of quid onto a packet of cigarettes, nobody gave up. When they saw it was coming year after year after year.
I don't think my son's quite got that memo.
Are there sort of barriers to them doing like, what's the expression, like a forced migration? You're on ADSL, that service, because it's a stupid analogy, but my son does climbing and he got taken over by another company, the climbing sort of wall that he uses, and it's like, after September, you'll have to rejoin with this one.
Right, okay.
I mean, Octopus didn't do this when I was with Bulb and it moved to Octopus. It was all very seamless.
Sure.
And obviously climbing's not like a critical national service, but
it's kind of tricky for the likes of BT and Openreach because of things like significant market power, etc. So it's more challenging.
Vulnerable customers. And
vulnerable customers is a key part of it as well.
I get that.
So it's not a clean yes or no answer.
And the exchange issue is one of the concerns about shutting down exchange, because I know the altnets have been using those. I mean, you were saying that you're putting some of your own equipment into Openreach exchanges.
We are.
If they want to go down from 5,600 to 1,000, it sounds like it could affect a lot of people.
So that remaining 1,000 that they refer to, they're referred to as the enduring exchanges.
Right.
So in the old world, when it was DSL and dial-up, we used to do things like local loop unbundling. So you'd put equipment into an exchange. Yeah. When Ian would order a service from me as a competitive operator, your Openreach, they would take the line off your Openreach frame and move it over onto my frame in the exchange, and it would go into my equipment. In a PON world, you can't really do that because the fibre that comes into the exchange, if you picture, I've got 32 households coming into a splitter and then a single strand of fibre representing those 32 households back in the exchange. So I can't unbundle that. So there's a concept called local enablement where we would put equipment into an exchange. They would hand off any one of the 32 as a unique VLAN, S-tag, C-tag via an Ethernet connection into my equipment. So that's how you do the kind of virtual unbundling, if you will. So
it's like subloop. Is it like a subloop thing, or
it's not quite the same from the point of view that you're not touching the infrastructure. It's all just virtual. It's just VLANs, you know.
Yeah.
So every customer that's on the OpenReach network today is represented by a unique S-tag, C-tag, VLAN combination. So all you're doing is you're taking receipt of that S-tag, C-tag, and they hand it off to your equipment within the exchange.
Right.
So within APFN,
this is reminding me of some of the conversations I had with you about 10 years ago. And I'm like, oh right, yeah, okay.
It's a refresher. but basically, there's a unique identifier that identifies your service that then they can hand over an Ethernet connection into my equipment within the exchange. What All Points Fibre are focused on is we're only targeting the enduring exchanges. So we've no equipment deployed in exchanges that are targeted to be switched off.
Yeah.
Now, there are lots of others out there that have a hybrid where they've got some of the enduring exchanges, but they've got quite a lot of the old legacy exchanges. And over the next 4 or 5 years, they're going to have to come up with plans to migrate those customers. And I think that's going to create a lot of dynamicism within the marketplace as we go forward, because the golden rule, particularly for enterprise type services, is if you've got an enterprise customer and they're working, don't touch them. Don't poke the bear. Leave them alone. You know what I mean? Because the switching risk as soon as you go near that customer is just too high, and the value of the customer is so high. But when you've got a scenario where that customer is being serviced out of a premises that's no longer going to offer the service, and you've got to move them onto something else, that could create quite a lot of switching within the market.
Yeah, I know Neos has made a big deal about this because it's sort of saying it kind of affects them because of the concerns about exchanges sort of being taken out of. Yeah, Lee will probably talk about it being taken out of service, in the future, and it's quite a big reduction in the footprint, obviously. But it sounds like they have to do it, otherwise they're not economically viable anymore.
The overhead that goes with it, like I mentioned earlier, we went from 350 systems down to 9.
Yeah.
Across that, we had to do something like 350, 400,000 unique customer migrations for our customer base to take them on the journey from the original various different systems that they were on down to a common system and eventually over onto the end system. It's really painful. It takes a lot of time. It's all out of hours stuff, in midnight, so you're not disturbing customers and so on.
There's things that can go wrong.
A lot of stuff can go wrong, and trust me, it does go wrong. You got to double check, triple check, quadruple check, and even then.
And then the local paper goes, "Oh, there was a disastrous outage," and
Thankfully, we avoided
press loves. I see them on like news aggregators that I look at. Any outage, and someone's all over it straight away.
Exactly. But
and there's nearly always a human interest story about some granny who couldn't find her cat as a result.
Exactly.
And is because you were saying it's XGS PON based at the moment, but there are other sort of plans to look at people. I talked to you about this before when you were at Adtran going up to 50 gig. Well, 20, Nokia likes the 25G thing, which you never did. But
well, it's interesting. So Nokia recently have done a demonstration in the UK market, and Adtran have done a similar one as well. Both of them doing 50 gig PON.
Yeah.
So I don't know if 25 has gone by the wayside now, and they're all just saying, right, okay, 50, it's 50. Yeah. I'm not close enough to it anymore to be able to tell you.
What is the broader strategic thinking? Because obviously, it's like with all technologies, you get these new generations coming along, and you get the impression that sometimes people will skip a generation. Is it just upgrade cycle or what?
I think so. You have the upgrade cycle piece of it, but also it's expanding the addressable market for the PON network that's being built. So remember, the network itself, the fibre is agnostic. It doesn't care about the technology. Yeah. So what all the vendors have done, and I remember this was the challenge that the industry had when I was leaving Adtran 18 months ago, was you didn't want to have to deploy a separate piece of 50 gig PON equipment and then use an external, what we call a coexistence element, a piece of glass, to combine that wavelength with the GPON and the XGS PON wavelengths that are already on the fibre. Really what you wanted, the silver bullet here, was if I could have a tri-combo transceiver that could do all three wavelengths onto the one fibre within the transceiver. That was the silver bullet that everyone was looking for. It seems they've all developed that silver bullet now in the last 18 months. So basically what you can do is you can come along and replace the OLT that you've got there that might be a combo OLT and replace it with a tri-combo OLT. All your GPON and XGS PON customers come straight back up, and now that PON is 50 gig enabled. So if you want to go after business customers or cell sites and stuff like you can. Yeah.
So it would always, in a completely sort of theoretical sense, it would always make sense to go for the most future-proofed technology. Like if you had a choice between 25 and 50, why wouldn't you?
Unless it's a cost difference.
It's a cost-benefit analysis. That's what it always comes down to.
But isn't the assumption that people are always going to use a bandwidth sooner or later? So you might as well go for the best. Although I suppose the flip side, I'm going to answer my own question. Maybe there's an early adopter aspect to it as well. Like when you think of consumer technology, being the very first to buy a new technology is often very cost ineffective.
Yep.
So maybe there's that. Anyway, sorry, I've answered my question there.
Just if I can comment on that.
Yeah.
So 4 or 5 years ago, that would have been the perspective. Definitely every year, 25% compound annual growth rate on bandwidth consumption. And that's been the case since the beginning of the internet, since dial-up. More bandwidth became available, applications evolved to take advantage of the bandwidth. What we've seen over the last 4 years or so is there is still growth in the consumption within households, but the growth has fallen off quite significantly. So we're used to trot along at 20 to 25%.
It's happened to mobile as well.
Williams S-curve.
Yeah.
So William's point is about mobile though, isn't it?
No.
Isn't it? Oh, it's about full stop. Oh, right. Sorry.
But basically,
I don't know why I got that one wrong.
Think about what are the drivers behind bandwidth on fibre networks, particularly consumer-focused fibre networks. It's video.
Yeah.
It's all TV. It's all streaming, etc. If you look at the UK market today, average household in the UK market has, I think it's 2.1 TVs or something like that. The last time I checked it was about 65% of UK households already had a 4K enabled TV.
Yeah.
Right? So assuming
8K is not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. Like half the living rooms in the UK are the size of this room.
Yeah.
No point in
unless we all move into mansions.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like getting our mates over for cinema evenings.
And just to clarify, the reason why you don't keep going up the resolution in TV is it gets beyond a point where you can discern the difference.
You can't see the difference.
Yeah.
And the only reason you'd use 8K is if a telly that took up half the fucking house.
200-inch type thing.
Yeah.
Like, but what really swung it for me was when I went to my local cinema, and we have a decent cinema beside us, one of the View cinemas, and in their largest screen, which is huge, it's one of the big ones, and I forget what movie we were watching. It was one of the recent ones, very high quality imagery within it, and in the opening kind of scenes of it, you could see a little thing down in the bottom right hand corner, Sony 4K, and you're looking at it going, holy shit, that thing is 200-foot screen.
And 4K is still doing the business.
4K is still doing the business. You know what I mean? So it's just...
Well, the cameras, they record 6K max.
Correct, yeah. All the red cameras and all that. Yeah, exactly.
The IMAX is the only one that's like, well, it's not really graded. It's like unlimited because it's film, but they say maybe that's more around 8, 10K, but everything else is below 8K. So.
Yeah.
Wow. But for... if you
So that driver's not going to be there.
The market the networks serve, the premises that they typically live in are not mansions, most of them.
Yeah.
4K has satisfied...
You don't have a private cinema?
I'm a big home cinema buff. Don't get me started on that. It's not quite a private, but I've taken over.
They're going to hang around with Ray LeMaitre. That's all he'll talk about.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, is Ray a big cinema buff as well?
Ray LeMaitre is the biggest cinema buff on the planet.
He and I were discussing vinyl the last time we were together.
He's always going on about his favourite movies. It's almost an interview question at one stage.
Do you dab into like laser projector territory kind of thing?
I'm a screen rather than a projector, but I'm very familiar with the laser projector technologies.
So OLED.
TV. Yeah. QLED or something.
But you've got one room in your house that's like a shrine to
it's a Dolby
AV
992 Atmos surround thingy.
Wow.
Yeah.
That used to be, that sort of takes me back. That used to be a bigger thing. It's interesting that some people are still into it. 'Cause I remember back when certain types of sort of consumer technology were more avant-garde. Yeah. I'm old enough to remember Tottenham Court Road in the 80s where you buy a hi-fi with all the separates. Yep. My first one was like that with a separate little graphic equaliser and shit like that.
Technics,
and then, all that. Kenwood speakers, I think they were.
AWA.
All those brands. I know. That was Tottenham Court Road. All of Tottenham Court Road was just stereos back in the 80s.
Richer sounds.
What was I going to say? Yeah, and then I remember in previous journalistic jobs where I've covered more broadly sort of consumer tech, and I remember speaking to people like Dolby and all that sort of thing. And people would invest, as you obviously have, in these big things. I haven't, but it's interesting that people are still really into that. What do you get out of it? Is it just the pleasure of enjoying the content to the sort of maximum capability of it?
Pretty much, exactly. It's the game has moved on. Like where historically, you had surround sound, you had the whole Dolby 5.1 and stuff like that, and that was kind of a flat plane, if you will, and then they went to 7.1 where they threw the rear ones behind you. What they've introduced in the last few years now is a thing called Atmos. It's about 5 years ago they started to introduce it, and what Atmos does is it's an overlay of overhead speakers. So if you picture a scenario where you're one of the action movies and there's helicopters going above your head, and it's quite powerful. It's pretty cool.
I mean, but sometimes they said the TV itself has it because it bounces off the ceiling and it's like
it's iffy. Yeah.
But if you have extra speakers, that's a whole. Yeah. But it's funny. My wife doesn't get it. She's like, "Yeah, it looks fine." I'm like, "It's way better than before."
I think it's definitely something you're into. I'm not in any way diminishing it or scoffing at Rona's choices, but it's never been something that I felt compelled. Granted, I haven't had the cash, but I've never felt compelled to really invest in that. As long as it's half decent.
Just having a subwoofer changes everything with sound. It's the depth. It's like 3D sound
type of thing.
Well, no, a subwoofer is your big bass speaker.
Oh, it's proper.
Know what I mean?
You can have soundbar that's like better, but you don't get the from the. Yeah. Anyway,
but you were that was a massive tangent because you were talking about over the last 4 years. It's sort of
So what we've seen is it's dropped off now. Where I've seen some figures as low as 2.5% compound annual growth rate. Right. So there is still a bit of growth there,
but data traffic
of data traffic on average when you average it across national networks and stuff like that.
So XGS-PON basically is going to be good enough for quite a while.
Quite a long time to go. Yeah, exactly.
So that's a counter to my compulsive future-proofing argument. We might be reaching a sort of plateau, a sort of diminishing return.
So I learned a long time ago in the industry, never say never.
Yeah.
Right. I always remember my brother-in-law, this is a long, long time ago, arrived home from work. He was an architect at the time, and he'd just got a new SunSpark station for doing his architect work. And this thing, all the software on it came on a thing called a CD-ROM. And each CD-ROM had 640 meg of data on it. And at the time, I had a 286 with a 20 meg hard drive. I remember going, that's bloody stupid. What would you need that for? And I continually remind myself of that conversation. Never say never. We don't know when the next
Bill Gates say in the 80s that why would you ever need any more than 128?
Well, I think I remember writing articles even when ADSL was all in vogue and it was ADSL 2 plus, and I was saying, why does anybody need more than 20 megabits a second to their house? So,
go on.
I mean, I was talking to my nephew who's like 14 about video games, and it's amazing how in the 10 years that he's known video games, it hasn't really changed that much. You look at a game like the last...
It's slightly more photorealistic,
but
like faces and stuff.
From when I was 4 to 14, it went from few pixels to 3D. Oh my God, is this real life?
Mate, when I was a kid, I was playing them on a Commodore 64 or something like that.
So then you're looking at, is the next 10 years, are we going to...
Well, I'm interested because William makes this point, William Webb, who you might have seen on the pod a few times, but he makes this point about applications. You're really talking about video and high definition video, and he can't see anything coming along with AI necessarily that would change that, because a lot of it's actually voice based anyway, and even if it is... it might be AI video based, but can you envisage, like in your position, anything that might... if you're trying to be super imaginative, I don't know, like some of the AR and VR wacky stuff that you might even see in science fiction films. I don't know.
My daughter, can I give a plug for my daughter's place where she works? Yeah. So my daughter Lucy works for Sandbox VR, which is one of the the high street virtual reality gaming environments that you can go in and game for an hour or so with the VR headsets. Really cool.
Nice.
She brought us in there a few weeks back, and well impressed with the experience on it.
You don't old enough to have a daughter with a proper job.
Yeah, she's 19 now. It's scary. But the interesting thing, and I'll take the compliment, thank you. But the interesting, I've always said with VR, I was one of the early adopters of Google Cardboard and all that sort of stuff.
Sounds like you're a bit of an early adopter generally.
Just a little bit. Yeah. And what you call it. It struck me very early on that great technology, huge potential, blah, 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 but it's an occasional technology. Nobody's realistically going to walk around for 8 hours a day with a headset on there. So you're going to use it. We've always said that about VR. VR is very niche. Yeah. However clever it might be and however successful your daughter's company might be, it's a niche use case. Yeah.
I mean, I think we'll get to a point sometime, perhaps in a not too distant future, where lots of people will have smart glasses with heads-up displays, and we were chatting a little while back to...
but I can't see it putting necessarily a lot of pressure on the network.
When we had Paolo on, we had I don't know if you ever met Paolo, an analyst. He was on the pod recently, and he had these Facebook Ray-Ban jobbies, and they've got cameras on. Yep. And we thought there is one little niche use case that would be quite, at least uplink intensive, which is people constantly going around live streaming their fucking banal lives. But like anyone gives a shit, but apparently some people do.
But not even just live streaming. I could see a scenario where, as we move into the era of agentic AI, and we've all got our own personal agentic AI tool, I could see, buddy, whatever you want to call it, exactly. I could see a scenario where you have a set of glasses that have a camera embedded into it, that your buddy is always looking over your shoulder. Your buddy's based in the cloud and prompting you and giving you
tips.
Yeah, exactly. But, again, from a bandwidth perspective, bandwidth is not the problem there.
No.
Battery is the problem.
Yes, totally.
We said that last time, yeah. Sorry, I have both a tangent on... it's a movie tangent, it's a telecom tangent, and it's also a network tangent.
Wow, all in one. That's value.
So yesterday I watched the BlackBerry movie. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
2 years ago?
Yeah, the BlackBerry.
And there's a scene at the beginning where they go to AT&T to pitch, and they go, no, we've already tried that, email over our network, and we could fit like 11 devices.
Yeah, that's right. The network was falling over every time they tried to put email over.
Yeah, so as I'm watching the movie, I was like, how is that even possible that back then just a few emails would crash the network?
Yeah.
So then they used the P2P technology.
Yeah.
But now, obviously, with today's network, you could fit even as a client.
An area I'd keep an eye out on is, now, caveat what we spoke earlier about resolutions and stuff like that. The game industry has shifted a little bit, and particularly for certain types of games, first-person shooters, flight sims, that sort of stuff, where the original model was you went to the high street, bought a disc or a tape or whatever it was. Originally, it was a tape.
Cassette.
Originally, it was a magazine. You had to type it in yourself.
I remember doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too.
When you had a Spectrum.
There you go.
ZX
Exactly.
Spectrum.
BBC Micro B. I did it on. But anyway.
I think I remember doing one and going for a shower.
Definitely aging yourself now, Ronan.
It deleted itself.
Are you about 400 years old?
That's not really a video game. That's more like a text. Yeah.
But anyway, so you started off in the high street. Then they moved to the download model. So it was a bit like music originally with iTunes. You paid and you downloaded it. And then the music industry moved to streaming. So what we're now starting to see, so I noticed this, it wasn't last year, it was the year before. Elliot, my son, he was playing Microsoft Flight Sim at home. And I was doing some testing of some Wi-Fi gear at home, as I did with my geeky hat on. And I had noticed there was about 20 megasecond going across the network, and the only two people in the house were me and him. And nothing was turned on as far as I was aware. And I shouted up the stairs, what are you up to? Teenager grunts. Why? I said, what are you up to? I said, I'm gaming. Why? Okay, what game are you playing? It's this Flight Sim. Why?
I have this all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I says, okay, do me a favour. I says, will you stop it for a second? I'm in the middle of it.
I'm about to land the fucking plane.
And I says, it's a Flight Sim. I said, you can pause it for a second. So I says, stop it for a second. Sure enough, as soon as you stopped it, the 20 meg dropped off.
Just pausing it.
Just pausing it, dropped off. So what I learned from it after doing a little bit of background research and stuff like that was Microsoft Flight Sim at the time, I don't know what it is now, but at the time it was 150 gigabytes to download it.
Oh, it's the maps, isn't it?
Wow.
So you download the 150 gig, and that gets you the cockpit layout, the plane, your controls and stuff like that. It doesn't get you the 2.4 petabytes of scenery that make up the world. They stream that to you. Now, back then they were streaming...
I've never played that. I didn't realise it was so powerful.
So back then they were streaming it to you at 20 megasecond, and
it's all pixelated.
It's all pixelated. It's kind of Minecraft type graphics. It still looks cool. Oh, look, there's my house.
It's pretty good, yeah.
But I can see an area in that and in first-person shooters where I could have an environment where I'm running around my local city, and it's a digital twin of my local city.
Or Grand Theft Auto. Yeah, the map is unlimited now.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess. It could be unlimited.
But it's almost identical to reality.
That's scary.
And they stream that to you. I can absolutely see that playing out. But again, from a resolution point of view, what's it going to be? It's going to be 20 megasecond, 30 megasecond, something like that. It's not going to blow.
So it's like high definition video. It's the same.
Yeah, but if you want like in a VR headset, you want it to be really pixel accurate. I mean, it'll use like where you look at, but still.
But these kids who are doing gaming at the moment, if they weren't doing that, they'd be watching high definition video movies like Infinity War or something anyway. So it's
I guess what we're groping around for is potential drivers.
William's point is that there's only so many hours in the day. There's only so many hours a day that you can sit there watching Netflix on your 8K TV, or your 4K TV rather.
Exactly.
And at the end of the day,
thing is, like on pretty much all the fronts, so on the ears and on the eyes, we've reached the maximum capability of the human senses.
Yeah.
You know, you can throw 16K on a TV on that wall. I'm not going to see it.
So they need to invent a new human, basically, before it becomes
That's another
a problem.
Great line in the BlackBerry movie where the AT&T CEO, what's his name at the time?
I can't remember.
Anyway,
Randall
Stevenson.
Yeah, that was probably before him.
Anyway, he goes, there's only a minute in a minute. That's the problem. Signaling that they're moving towards data.
Right. He was trying to think through how to get them to download more data, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Listen, I'm going to butt in. I've got two things. I want to move on to other stuff because we're running out of time.
Well, I was going to ask one more thing.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, let's just get the last thing out of the way. There's always one more thing. Trying to time manage this fucking podcast with him. There's always one more thing. And I was going to give
Bill Gates.
And I was going
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs.
Yeah. I was going to give Ronan a chance to sort of wrap up if there's anything we've missed about your current venture that you want to mention. And then the other question I got for you, Ian, is I think it's time we tried some of Ronan's beers.
Yeah.
So do you want the Pilsner, the Mango, or the Pale Ale?
I don't mind. Can I do my last question?
Yeah. Do you want me to pick for you then?
Yeah, you pick for me. Right. Because one thing we haven't talked about, and you've jumped from the supplier side to the operator side, and Scott was saying we always talk about mobile mainly, and one of the conversations in mobile for a long time has been like choice of suppliers, supply diversity.
Yeah.
It occurs to me that it still seems to be quite a small market of suppliers on the sort of fiber access side of things, and
it's just
it's become smaller. With geopolitics and everything. There's people you can't use. Adtran, where you were, Calix is the other one. They're still relatively small in the bigger scheme of things. And you look beyond Nokia, only seems to be the other scale company. I'm just wondering if there's any motivation among operators themselves to have, like the mobile operators wanted to get more people into it. Is that something that you guys think about, or are you sort of quite happy with where things are?
Again, keep in mind strategically APFN and our focus, the equipment and the source of the equipment that goes on to lighting the fibre is less of a concern for us these days. Now, that said, where we do use electronics, we are very cognizant of supply chain and making sure that we've got diversity of supply chain on that. And, we've even seen that recently in CPE, where one of our CPE vendors had an exclusive agreement for distribution in the UK with, I forget the name of the company they were using, and the company went wallop.
Right.
And it took them quite a bit of time, and we weren't the only ones impacted by this. Now, thankfully, we still had stock. This was for our business solution, CPE. But basically, a lot of people were starved out. There was a lot of people scrambling, trying to get supply of that particular CPE. So supply chain diversity is something that we watch very closely to make sure we have dual source in every scenario, so we don't get caught out with that side.
Makes sense. And so, were there any last things that you want to leave our audience with to know about 1.5 network?
I think the key thing to keep in mind is
it's the Mango one.
Based on what we discussed, I think most of us would agree at this point the bandwidth has become commoditized now at this point.
Yeah.
And, with the availability of it across the UK, the price points that are out there as well, the service providers really need to start rethinking what gives them differentiation.
Yeah.
And there's a whole ton of stuff that service providers are doing that mirrors exactly what we're doing as a wholesale provider that doesn't differentiate them. Why are they still doing it? They really need to be asking themselves that question. That's the trick question, because they're getting squeezed on the price, they're getting squeezed on the margin. The free cash has disappeared. It's now harder than ever to raise capital. When we met the last time, we were talking about government bonds, zero, negative interest rates, and we're not there anymore.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. The interest.
Believe me, I just had to redo my fucking mortgage.
There you go. Exactly. So it's harder and harder to raise money now at this point in time. So if they want to get to profitability, they really need to start thinking about the operational costs and asking themselves, does running a core IP network differentiate me anymore? Do my customers care where they get the IP from?
Yep.
Or is it my brand that's important? And the ones that are clever will realise that they need to focus on the brand, they need to focus on the marketing and getting customers on board and jettison the things that don't differentiate them.
That's a whole different tangent, which if we had time, I would get into now. I find the marketing behind telecoms always funny. I mean, we've like taken a piss out of EE for doing robot shaving on the top of a mountain and shit like that in the past. But I'll continue to take a piss out of it when these ads get absurd. But I do sympathise because you're trying to market something that's very abstract, that's intangible. We've always had throughout the years these sort of I always hark back to, again, showing my age, like Bob Hoskins saying it's good to talk and all that sort of thing.
Wasn't it Maureen Lipman before him as well?
Before or after, it was around that time, 80s, 90s. And her thing, everyone remembers her ads where she's talking to her nephew who's just fucked his exams up, and she's able to just sort of put a positive gloss on it while chatting to him on the phone.
I remember that, yeah.
And all that sort of thing. And those were great ads. But they were...
These days you just WhatsApp someone, wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, but they were creative, because then they were just extolling the virtues of chatting to someone. Even then, I found it a little bit weird. Is like they're trying to persuade people to chat someone on the phone as if it hadn't occurred to you. You're like, God, if only I could talk to that fucker who's miles away. And then suddenly you see his BT ad and go, oh shit, I could just pick up the phone, as if it hadn't occurred to you already.
Yeah.
But I do, and I sympathise within this era. The people who use your platform as a wholesaler, how they differentiate themselves marketing-wise. I certainly don't have any top tips, other than to say, if you, perhaps to get it really wrong, because then at least you'll have the notoriety of us taking the piss out of it on the pod. But I mean, how do you differentiate yourself as a comms provider?
I think part of it is bundle complexity. So, like, I always remember a long time ago, I won't mention the individual's name just in case he wasn't meant to share it with us. But you like that, do you?
So Ian, no one, even the people watching won't notice this because of camera won't have been on Ian. I said to him, pick what you want, and he goes, no, you pick for me. So I picked the mango one. He just tasted it. He looked like he'd just eaten.
It's quite soapy.
Shit. It's quite what?
Soapy.
Do you mind if I try it?
Perfumey?
Soapy. Well, often they are, aren't they?
Yeah, but that's soapy in a different way.
Yeah, it's different. I'll give it that. It's not awful, but yeah, I don't think I'd seek it out. Sorry, you were saying, Ron. We were talking about marketing and differentiation.
Yeah, so bundle complexity has a lot to do with it from the point of view of if you've got one service from me and Scott comes knocking on your door offering to give you the same service for cheaper, there's a reasonable possibility that you might churn to that. And let's say it's a possibility. Let's say it's a possibility. We'll ignore that bit. But let's say it's a possibility of 30%, 40%. Now, if Scott's giving you broadband and TV, that possibility falls.
Yeah.
If he's giving you broadband TV and fixed phone, it falls even further. If he's giving you broadband TV, fixed phone and mobile, it gets down to almost zero.
And energy.
And energy. There you go. There you get it.
And groceries.
So the greater the bundle complexity, the stickier the customer.
That makes sense.
So, and
that was Sky's MVNO bright idea, really, wasn't it?
Absolutely. But you could look into this and go, right, we've got to invent all this stuff. And that's the wrong answer. That's the old way of doing things. This is where wholesalers like APFN come into play to say, there's things that we can provide you with as a white label service that you can go and sell to your customers.
Yeah.
You don't have to invent it all. You don't have to stand up a team of engineers and feed and water this thing that you've got 10% market penetration on. Instead, you take it as a service from us. We're now spreading that across multiple service providers, so we're getting the aggregate market penetration, which gives you the economics the thing needs to work, if you will.
Good pitch. You can see why he gets the big bucks. Why he can afford those home cinema systems.
There you go.
And mango beers.
And mango beers. Yeah, Ronan, when he came into the room, he noticed that we've got a whole shitload of beers and other forms of alcohol littered around on the floor here.
There's quite a lot of wine as well, I think.
And well, the reason wine is we're not going to break open a bottle of wine on the pod, are we? But every now and then I explain that the beers are a sort of combination of ones that either we didn't fancy, or like we took the piss out of Phil Mottram from HPE when he came on because he brought Foster's.
Oh wow!
And we're like, we're not drinking fucking Foster's.
I haven't had Foster's in a long time.
But that mango, it looks like that's going to be one of the ones that sticks around for a little while. I don't think there's a lot of takers.
You should do a wall of shame.
Yeah, wall of shame.
How strong is it?
So that's quite weak, actually, only 4.1. So it's not like one of the scary ones like Charlie Ashton brought in. Anyway, I better move it on. There was
Can we take a pause?
Okay, go on then.
Just need the.
All right, while he's doing it, I will. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, we're back. We've got like half an hour max left, so I'm going to get on to the next topic. By the way, the pale ale's very nice.
It's not bad, is it?
Time War.
Are you all right for a beer, by the way?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. A story that Ian and I spontaneously both wrote. Like I said, I've told lots of people on the pod, Ian and I are not like in constant communication with each other during the week. We just sort of compare notes, sort of live ad hoc on the pod. And one story that we both just happened to have written, I hadn't even read and still haven't read Ian's one, but we covered the same thing. my headline was, so this is a complete tangent from what we've been talking about. And as ever, Ronan,
it's another topic.
Yeah, it's a different topic. Yeah, not a tangent, it's a different topic. You dip in as far as you think is professionally expedient for you. My headline was quite short. Europe capitulates to the US over, quote, fair share. Ian's was Trump killed EU telecoms, quote, fair share idea after a round of golf. So you can see that we're both covering this, more or less the same thing. And long and short of it, I actually got mine. I credited it on the thing. I actually first saw it because a regular guest of ours, Dean Bubley, had flagged it up on LinkedIn. He's a good LinkedIn follow.
Absolutely.
He's fucking prolific on LinkedIn. Yep. And he loves that topic, to shit on it, as do we, more or less. I think we're in agreement that we're not a fan of it, the concept. And for people who are listening who don't know what that is, this is a broader concept. I think I sort of...
It used to be called fair contribution, then they shortened it to fair share.
Yeah, I still think fair contribution is more accurate, but fair enough. But basically, it is the sort of European operator assertion that a lot of the traffic they carry is generated by US big tech, especially as we were just talking about previously, streaming platforms like Netflix and YouTube and all that sort of thing. And they're going, well, we're carrying all their shit for free. They should chip in. And then the counter argument. I mean, I think even if I speak so for myself, I think I summarised it quite succinctly. So I'm going to read my own writing back. I said counter arguments often mention that content is a major demand driver for telecom subscriptions. The sunk cost of network capex. That's one that like Dean first flagged us me. In other words, they've already built the fucking network. And the general absurdity of billing at the supply as opposed to demand end of the value chain. So those are three things that I flagged up as arguments against it, and I'm not for it. Anyway, so we had this big trade deal. Trump's been over here. I mean, it's slightly embarrassing. He's been over here on basically a golf trip / sort of maintaining he's got big investments in Scotland on golf courses.
He's gone to Scotland and everybody's gone to see him.
And everyone's just flocked up there. I know. I mean, as the Americans would say, the optics of it are very much Europe sort of kowtowing to Trump. And presumably if Europe went to the States, they'd go to Mar-a-Lago or something like that. But then part of that, I mean, the only defence I would make of that is people realise Trump doesn't exactly hide his sort of ego profile.
No.
And people know that to do business with Trump, you have to stroke his ego. And I suppose the most grown-up thing to do is just go, fuck it, I'll stroke his ego, as long as I get what I want in the end. But the feeling was from this big EU-US trade deal is that, as well as stroking his ego, it sounds like he mainly got what he wanted as well. That's the superficial take, i.e. there's a blanket 15% tariff on EU
Well, there are some
exports.
Exemptions.
With plenty of exemptions, and also the other thing that when the really
30%,
when the real, but and also the real catastrophist headlines, I think, are underplaying quite how many tariffs the EU had already imposed on US imports, and also what Trump likes to go on about, which is non-tariff trade restrictions, like regulatory or whatever. Anyway, that's part of the thing he's had the arsehole about, and why he had that big Independence Day thing, wasn't it? And so...
Liberation Day.
Sorry, yeah, Liberation Day, sorry. Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah, some kind of fucking day.
Independence Day is already taken, so...
Yes, Smith, wasn't it?
Yeah. I know.
He's going to star in Liberation Day.
I'm getting to that age, Ronan, where I'm just mucking things up. I can't remember names. I'm always screwing names up.
Dave.
Anyway, yeah, I know. I just call everyone Dave now. And anyway, and so there was this big deal, and always these trade deals, the devil's in the detail, and actually a lot of the times the initial agreement is just the start of the negotiation, and then there's a lot more fine tuning down. But obviously everyone's got to get their sound bites and their bits of press, and the White House published a fact sheet called Fact Sheet: the United States and European Union reach massive trade deal. It sounds like sort of Alan Partridge wrote it.
Massive.
Massive. Well, do you remember my the thing that always made me laugh most, Pierre, from the Day Today? So do you remember a thing called the Day Today? I don't know if you got it in Ireland. I know you've been living on and off in England for a long time.
Name.
But the Day Today was like a spoof current affairs thing from the 90s.
Okay.
And it's where
Steve
the
Coogan.
Alan Partridge character was first created.
Oh,
He was
really?
like
Okay.
their sports correspondent who knew fuck all about sport. That was one of his. That was one of his things. He's a complete dilettante.
Yeah.
And they'd do this horse racing, and they'd send up not just horse racing coverage, but the whole premise of horse racing, which I always found baffling. I remember a kid when that was all there was on telly, and I'd be like, "Why? Why is this shit on?"
And there were 3 channels.
And the horses always had these fucked up names, like these weird names. They've got their paddock names and they've got their horse racing names that were always really weird. And I remember Steve Coogan being Alan Partridge just going through these horse names, and one of the horse names was called Massive Bereavement. And I just always thought those 2 words together as a name for a horse were just so hilarious. So that's what made me think of him when I saw Massive Trade Deal. Anyway, and within
tangent.
this, if you good tangent. I know, and I don't have time. I'm my own worst enemy.
This is great banter.
Yeah. Within this, you had to scroll through it, and I hadn't. And I got to give credit to Dean Bubley who had. And I saw this on LinkedIn, where there's just one little section. So the White House came out with all this summary of what was agreed. But the interesting thing about these things is they're unilateral. So they had their agreement, and there's all these lovely, it's great, he's a hard, tough negotiator, but he's fair, and everyone's shaking hands, and everyone these photos, and then they all go back to their separate corners and spin it to their own advantage. And so the White House came out with this fact sheet, and in one little bit, it just said, under barriers for digital trade, the United States and European Union intend to address unjustified digital trade barriers, which seems one directional in that way because it was always the US pointing that accusatory finger at the EU. In that respect, the European Union confirms that it will not adopt or maintain network usage fees. And then the final part of that paragraph is, furthermore, the United States and European Union will maintain 0 customs duties on electronic transmissions, which seems like more or less a tautology, seems like more or less the same thing. Maybe I'm missing something. But anyway, network usage fees feels like a euphemism for fair share, the thing that I just summarised earlier. Yep. So I wrote that up, but I've banged on for a bit here, and you wrote it up too. What was your take on that?
Yeah,
clause?
My view about it is the same as yours. Like your paragraph where you summed up the reasons why you thought it shouldn't happen, I kind of go along with that. And
I was right to self-aggrandise there.
Pretty much said that for about 2 years now. But I thought it was, what I find quite interesting about it is, if you look at what's going on in the US, like fair share is quite closely related to the concept of net neutrality. Yep. Which is a hot political topic in the US, possibly more so than it has been in Europe. And what's
definitely
interesting
more politicised.
What's interesting, I think, about what that White House statement contained was that it's almost at odds with the Republicans' position on net neutrality in the US, where they're very much, that's basically an issue where if there's a Democrat sitting in the White House, then net neutrality gets enforced. If there's a Republican sitting in the White House, then he sides with the telcos and net neutrality regulation gets kind of abolished. Yep. And in this case, it's country comes before industry sector. And I think I put in my story that Trump cares more about the US beating Europe than he does about telcos beating
because he's a national populist. He's not a traditional Republican at all.
Of course. And if big tech companies all came from Europe, then you might even understand it more. You might sort of, big tech companies basically, like the Europe is full of, there's a galaxy of telcos. There's no internet companies basically. So he's obviously wanting to stick up for US interests. The idea of European telcos trying to penalise big American firms is something that would piss him off, I imagine, regardless of anything to do with net neutrality and fair share.
But to me, it's almost analogous to, if we were to use a local example like Octopus Energy, for example, it's almost like analogous to Octopus going after companies like Philips and Whirlpool and stuff like that, because they make tumble dryers and they're energy intensive.
So that's the demand, that's the supply side rather than demand side part of my summary. Well, and I'm with you on that. Well, I think you've always made. I think
the analogy I made was it's like a bookshop sort of saying, J.K. Rowling should pay for new fixtures and fittings because her last novel brought loads of people into the building.
Or I think another analogy you've made is BMW paying for roads.
Totally, it's a bit of a daft argument, and I think you were saying that the sunk cost network side of it, which I think is really interesting, given your comments about what's happening with traffic and growth. I mean, if there was any
it's a moot point. It's going away.
It's the wrong time to have come out with this argument, really, because if there was any signs of telcos being forced to spend a huge amount on infrastructure, Ericsson and Nokia wouldn't be in the situation that they're in at the moment, basically.
The truth is, if you look at the technology that's available regardless of which part of the network you look at, whether it's the access, the edge, the core, the transport, the cost per bit to transport a bit of digital information has gone down.
Yeah.
Exponentially fallen for decades.
Yeah.
It's cheaper now to send a bit than it ever was, but when you factor in every other consideration, including the volume of traffic.
I wonder if there's a data point that reconciles that with the amount of bits that are out there.
No, but even when you factor that in, it's scale economies,
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, I wonder, though, if this will... I mean, I was quite outspoken in my headline, and as you try to be, but there's no doubt that the big European telco groups, which have made an issue of this over the last 2 years, will try and resurrect it, I'm sure, at some point. Unless they come up with some other huge growth story, they'll probably try to, find another way of bringing it back into the political discussion. I'm sure.
I'm gonna read myself back to the audience again because I just love the sound of my own voice.
Yeah, you do that, Scott.
So the point we both made in our pieces is that the US detailed that thing that I just read out earlier. There was no sign of that in any European summary, either in von der Leyen's initial speech or in their little equivalent fact sheet. So what this feels like is a sort of weird form of negotiation where now the EU's gone, right, we've had this chat, I've shaken von der Leyen's hand and it's all groovy, and now I've gone back and now this is where the real fucking negotiations
Well, I'm wondering whether they didn't want to sort of admit to more embarrassing concessions that they'd had to make, along with spending $700 billion on US guns and oil and gas.
Well, yeah, but they don't have to admit it because the Yanks have gone and stuck it in a fact sheet.
Yeah, I know, but they don't want to draw attention to it.
We're too late.
There's too many other things about that trade deal that don't look particularly good for Europe. The last thing they want to be slipping into it is, oh, by the way, fair share's dead as well. Let's just. No one's going to care about something like that because it's a very telco specific thing. But
so yeah, I just said when I was analysing it, just sort of assessing the likelihood of this US statement becoming part of whenever the deal's complete. And I guess these sort of deals are kind of rolling. They're always being renegotiated to some extent. But I said, if the initial phase of negotiations is anything to go by, subsequent ones will consist of Trump making demands supported by threats and the EU capitulating. Since the White House fact sheet can be taken as a list of those demands, it would appear the matter of fair share has been concluded in the negative for the foreseeable future. Does anyone have any issue with that statement?
I mean, I think, to be honest with you, I think it was probably not going anywhere before Trump came in.
It wasn't getting much momentum.
I think the last sort of the European Commission had sort of said they put it out to regulators, hadn't they? And I think what's the group called? BEREC.
BEREC, yeah.
Have basically not really liked it.
No, and
well.
there've been a few people just going, just shut up.
And it seemed to be. I think even the people who were pro fair share sort of realised the argument was a bit stupid.
Yeah. But I think the last time the mobile side of the business was trying to push it, people were pointing out that the rate of growth had softened. The issue has gone away.
Yeah.
Well, and if you're talking about video streaming, most of that's done over fixed anyway.
Yeah. The book analogy that I used is obviously the difference is like when you get more people through the door because of J.K. Rowling's new book. Yeah, it might cause like you need to buy new carpets after a while, but you sell a lot more books. Yeah. But whereas I suppose the operators would say there's all that traffic. Now, there's the cost side of this. How much does that put pressure on anyone? You were talking about that. But even if you go along with that, even if you're sort of sympathetic to that argument, that at some point they do have to put in more capacity, that's their own problem. They've priced things the way they've priced things. It's not like the internet companies force them to sell 50 gigabytes a month to Alex Morris so he can put skateboarding videos up on the bus when he goes home.
But here's the key thing is, if those content providers unearthed a new way of delivering that, how many people would still buy broadband?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
and that's the point you
make.
The
demand driver part of
absolutely.
So it'd be a bit like sort of Netflix going, well, we spend a lot of money on content, and you guys do pretty well out of that. I mean, no one's going to be buying your broadband service if it wasn't for all of our shows. Why don't you put some money towards the cost of doing it, or even more so now in the age of AI? Like you're saying, AI is pretty critical. We're spending all the money on AI, and hang on a minute.
Well, I'll tell you one last
get in your lane.
One last argument against it that I didn't put in my written bit. but that occurs to me now and is especially relevant in the Trump era, is what's your negotiating position? So, I mean, basically, the fair share people have been appealing to the EU and to regulators to enforce it because they don't have a negotiating position. They don't have anything to threaten content providers with.
Yep.
So, and that's the problem. We obviously need regulation, and I'm naturally, as is a cliche on this pod, a sort of laissez-faire, light touch regulation kind of guy. But obviously, when you've got an industry that's a utility / a very high barrier to entry, there needs to be some regulation. Otherwise, you're always going to gravitate towards monopolies and all that sort of thing. But the fact still remains that they've got nothing that they can hurt Netflix or Google with. Right. So they're relying entirely on regulators to fight their corner. And to draw a line on this, because there's one last thing I want to say, and we've only got about 10 minutes left. One last topic I want to cover.
Just before you go off that one.
Oh, yeah, go on.
So selfishly, looking at this through the lens of APFN, the ones that are making the most noise about these types of things are the ones that typically have underinvested in their network infrastructure for many years, and they feel the pain point.
Yeah.
B, because of the 15% tariffs that have now been applied on for people, those same people who must invest in their network infrastructure to try and deal with these pain points is now going to cost them 15% more than what it would have done if they had invested previously in the first place.
Yeah,
so
right.
Selfishly, from our perspective, we applaud it.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. So last thing I wanted to talk about, this is very much a Scott thing. This week, parts of a thing that I've ranted on about.
I was going to say something else.
Oh, go on then. Sorry, mate. I didn't.
I was just going to say, I think just before you do that, the net neutrality discussion, I think, is a bit more nuanced than the fair share discussion, and I'm more sympathetic towards some of the arguments on the net neutrality side on both. So I think there's some extreme positions I think with net neutrality are a little bit silly because I don't think it's been very well defined. So when it comes to a telco doing a deal with Spotify that might give the customers some kind of beneficial deal if they sign up to Spotify, and you get like law cases resulting because it disadvantages Deezer, and I think that's ridiculous personally. I think that's and things like when it prevents things like certain network slicing cases where you might want to put a slice in for a factory service, and someone's saying, well, if you look at networks, if you look at regulations, that's a prioritized service, and it's going to. I think you can take it to a silly extreme.
But there was I'll be honest, I'm rusty on this because again, it's a couple of years since I looked closely at it. But I remember distinctly when being with the Fibre to the Home Council Europe, we were in with the EU Commission, and we had raised the question with regard to their stance on
specialised services, I think they were calling it.
Yeah. On the angle we were coming at it from was, does it automatically infer that if you're not allowed negatively interfere with traffic, that it also infers that you're not allowed positively interfere with traffic?
Yeah.
Yes.
And the response to that was no.
Yeah.
So long as your positive interference doesn't result in negative interference for someone else. So i.e. you don't take Scott's application and starve out all the bandwidth.
But that still sets up some subjective calls on what's positive and what's negative, doesn't it?
I guess the problem is capacity is finite, isn't it? That's the issue.
It is. So if I take all of Scott's traffic and give him all the bandwidth and Ian has no bandwidth left, that would be positive interference that results in negative impact for you. So they say that's not allowed.
Yeah.
But can I sell a SLA to Scott to say, I'll make sure you've guaranteed latency or whatever?
Yeah.
And you can't prove that that's to Ian's detriment.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
It's a complex area, but I think you can take it to some silly extreme positions, the net neutrality side of things. So I think,
but people get very absolutist.
Fair share, which is related to it clearly, because if Netflix says we don't want to pay these fees, then the implication is you're going to block them, and then that gets into fair share. I think that's.
Well, I'll tell you where, and this will give me a segue into the last.
Sorry,
bit,
you were doing a deal online.
Which I now have fuck all time to talk about.
Just rant.
Well, I think I'm going to have to for the last bit. But there's a segue, because in the States, one of the reasons it's political is because the pro-net neutrality people, I get the impression that they want there to be more state control and influence over how comms networks run their business. And so that's a segue to my little ranty bit at the end, where I wrote a story this week, headlined Online Safety Act becomes a political liability once more. And it coincides with the Online Safety Act, which I've banged on about on this pod a few times, because it's been a piece of legislation that had been festering for about 5 years. And it came into effect to some extent a little while back, but one critical aspect of it came into effect this week, which is mandatory something like age vetting or something like that. And now I'm going to quickly summarise what the Online Safety Act is. It was billed as a way of protecting kids from some of the fucked up stuff that happens on the internet. No one has got an argument against that. Mm-hmm. My argument against it was always that the kid part of it was always a bit of a, I think, bad faith, thin end of the wedge for more broader censorship. And I hyperlinked to actual press releases from Ofcom, because Ofcom has been charged with doing this job. And one of the criticisms I had, and this came up briefly when we had Harry from Ofcom on, who did a great job of defending it, by the way, but I kind of still stand by it. And by the way, Harry, if you're listening and you want to get one of the censorship people on from Ofcom to tell me I'm full of shit, then feel free. But so there's the protecting kids from grooming, protecting kids from seeing inappropriate content, etc., etc. But you know, in the last year, there's been a thing where here's one click through a press release: the Manosphere unmasked. This is 13th of June this year. It was a whole thing they wrote about basically blokes on the internet, with the apparent assumption that blokes on the internet are a threat to be misogynistic if you don't keep a fucking eye on them. And I disagree with that premise by itself, but I also think that's a mission creep from the protecting kids from bad shit sort of thing. And there was another bit I linked to, which is an announcement 16th of May from Ofcom: sports stars suffer impact of online abuse in the real world. Again, that's not good. No one's happy about sports stars getting shit, but that still feels like mission creep. And there are a few other examples I put in there, including misinformation, which is this handy, vaguely defined catch-all. And the interesting thing about it, so I wrote this sort of ranty piece, and as you can probably tell, I feel ranty about it because it feels like state censorship, and it felt like it when it was first introduced by the Tories like 3 or 4 years ago. But now Labour's followed through on it, and they're defending it to such an extent that some absurd Labour politician accused Nigel Farage, who was opportunistically ranting against it because he'd stuck his finger in the wind and realised that people were banging on about it, and accused him of basically saying, if Jimmy Savile was still around now, you'd be in favour of him for opposing this thing. This sort of hyperbolic, really bad faith, tasteless stuff. And that's my biggest issue with it. It feels like they're using the very legitimate matter of protecting kids. We've all got kids. We can all relate to it. And we've all got kids who we've had to bring up through the internet era. So we've all had to deal with this shit. And so we've all got total sympathy. And if it had narrowly defined its remit and kept it there, I would have no issue with it. But it feels like the thin end of the wedge. It feels like that what this is a much more political control over online discourse and online content. And there've been all these sort of... I was reading about it in the Spectator on the way down. There've been all this apparently unintended consequences where legitimate stuff, including MPs doing speeches on sensitive shit, has been blanket blocked, because all the platforms like X and Facebook and YouTube, because of this law, they're just like, fuck it, we're going to censor everything, because it's quite incoherent, it's quite messy, it's quite ill-defined.
So are you saying that all of a sudden, as of when this came in, there's loads of shit in the UK that we can't get access to anymore? So it's not even just a case of
saying that.
Some dodgy websites where you need to put your face in.
Yeah,
you might not want to, Scott, because you used to go to those and you can't get them anymore.
That's about the fourth time you said that joke today, you bastard.
But it's actually like even an MP speech on a particular topic, you can't.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the problem with censorship on the whole. And it's a problem with anything that
a bazooka to swat a fly.
Oh yeah, it's a bazooka to swat a fly. I think that came up on the pod once, and we once joked about how fun it would be to try. It's a broad brush, and the broader concept for me that always rankles a little bit is overuse of the word safety. You can view safety and freedom as being on a sort of continuum, with safety, absolute freedom as the two extremes. And what we're always looking for is some kind of perfect balance in between. And this feels like it's taking that balance too far in the direction of safety at the expense of freedom. Anyway, what I'm pleased to see is that loads of media have been freaking out about it.
But the fascinating stuff now is if you look at the sheer volume of content now that we're seeing emerging out of the whole Gen AI space, what are they going to do with that?
Yeah.
The pace at which that stuff's being created and the realism of the content as well. It's, they're going to have their work cut out for them.
Yeah, well, I think somewhere in my story I used the phrase that the genie's already out of the bottle with the internet. You know, basically, obviously, governments and centres of power have always wanted to try and control the public discourse a little bit, and they used to be able to when it's just newspapers. You could lean on publishers or whatever. But with the internet, it's just too distributed.
So where are they? How are they monitoring this and deciding where those boundaries are drawn? Because obviously there's sites that would get designated as a no-go, like a porn site.
Yeah.
You know that
they're the obvious ones.
There's the obvious ones.
And there's age verification. Although even that, sorry to quickly butt in, there was a BBC story earlier on this week that suddenly the top of all the download charts, the app download charts, are VPNs. Because that's the way you get around age verification.
Yeah, but the I think the BBC actually even did a story on porn sites specifically this week, which is probably why I know about that, because they'd said all of a
not
sudden
because you're always looking for
not because
stories
I'm obviously looking at those sites.
Got your back,
all
mate.
Of a sudden,
1-1.
all of a sudden that you need age verification because you don't want your 15-year-old like looking at that sort of stuff.
And I agree with that,
as they might be inclined to do at that age.
And thankfully, 15-year-olds aren't tech savvy, so they won't be able to work their way.
No, they're definitely. They're just like, I'll just give up then.
But when it comes to like somebody writing for the Spectator, with like Rod Liddell, for instance, I mean, he's someone who's definitely going to get in trouble. Pretty much any article he writes has got something
kind of
inflammatory in it.
It's kind of his thing.
How do they decide?
Well, quite.
And it really does sound like when you're starting to look at stuff that he might say, that you're getting into somebody having to look at this and make a judgment call, or maybe an AI system's doing it, which is even more worrying, frankly.
Well, and that's where I get back, and I'm going to have to wrap up because Pierre's got something to do in 5 minutes in this studio. He's going to need us to get the fuck out of here. Yeah, what? He's got to record another video. Yeah. That's like the broader concept of censorship. That's where it's always tricky. It starts with good intentions. Let's protect vulnerable people from bad shit. But it's so hard, as Ronan said, that bazooka to kill a fly, it's such a crude instrument that, this is where it's going. And I'm pleased to see there's been all this mess and all this outrage. Whether anything will come of it remains to be seen. And I feel slightly vindicated because I've been banging on about this for a while. And to a certain extent, I felt like a bit of a fanatic because other people don't seem to get as worked up about this shit as I do. So I'm pleased to see that it's made it onto the front pages this week and people are going on about it. And let's see where it goes. But I'd better wrap up there, guys, because Pierre's got stuff to do. Ronan, it's great to see you again, mate.
Likewise. Pleasure.
If your flight back to Ireland allows, please join us for a pint in a pub. But I better shut up because Pierre's got about 3 minutes to get us out of the room and get ready for something else. So just a reminder to everyone, this is all you get for about another month because of these selfish colleagues of mine going on summer holidays, unlike me. I think the next one will be like early September, won't it? So have a good summer, everyone, and see you back then.